This is Lightning Ridge. It's a community that was born out of opal mining. And one of the first to do that was Charles Nettleton. And it's Charles Nettleton that brings me out here to the ridge today. It gives me a great pleasure to be able to install a life-size bronze that I've sculpted and the town's dedicating to his memory. Charles was one of the founding opal miners here at Lightning Ridge, if not the founding opal miner of Lightning Ridge. And it's all this that we see around us is a result of his initial efforts back in 1901. He was on his way to the Bathurst gold diggings at the time, stopped over here at Lightning Ridge and found nodular opal, and it was enough to entice him to sink a shaft. Nettleton also had an opal mine at Whitecliffs, and he took his first parcel of opal to Whitecliffs, and the opal miners of Whitecliffs obviously saw this, and he spoke quite highly of the area and the possibilities here. And in 1903 he brought miners from Whitecliffs back over here to the ridge, and there was some 200 miners here by 1903, and by 1906 there was 1,500 miners here. So it was really the growth and birth of an industry. Starting a sculpture like this means that first you've got to come up with an initial design. In this case I use a model to do a variety of poses to see what might work. And once I've settled on a pose, I then flesh out an armature. An armature is a steel frame which will mimic basically a skeletal structure for the whole sculpture. It'll become the support, and which enables me to sculpt in clay over the top of the piece. It's not actual clay that I'm using to sculpt this piece, it's plasticine, which is basically an oil-based clay, so it won't dry out. It gives me some freedom to keep coming back to it without it drying out and cracking and falling off the armature, which gives me a great deal of freedom. The initial reference to work from for the Charles Nettleton sculpture is a 1938 black and white photograph taken of Charles on the opal fields. It's an old grainy black and white, but there's enough detail in it to get an idea of facial structures and bone structures of the man. From this I developed an initial maquette, and a maquette is a small scale version or a study of the larger sculpture to be. I was raised here at Lightning Ridge, and it was this white sandstone. Well, this isn't actually sandstone. It's a shin cracker, and it's no good for carving. But the sandstone here is a beautiful stone to carve. It's nice and soft. It was that sandstone that I did my very first sculptures out of. As a kid I made rudimentary sculptures out of the sandstone, just using a knife and carving away at it. But and I was stimulated by a school teacher of mine here at the Ridge that was carving a Mother Mary portrait out of sandstone. And that really got me kicked off. So I've got a lot to thank Lightning Ridge for. It was the start of my sculpting career, that's for sure. I still come back here for the stimulation of the place, to paint and to sculpt. It's just a lovely environment to be in. Artistically minded person, Lightning Ridge is the ideal place to be. It has a certain freedom here in Lightning Ridge, and I'm sure the early opal miners felt that too. They were unrestricted by governments and rules and regulations, and to a certain degree that air of freedom still exists here today. It's a wonderful environment for anyone with an artistic nature to come and work and to just live and enjoy. The next stage in the whole process, once I've sculpted the piece, is to make a silicon rubber mould. And the rubber mould is built up over days, if not a week, and each coat goes on a little thicker. So we build up quite a thick coat of rubber, and this rubber mould is then backed up and bolstered with a plaster and fiberglass mould. This all comes away from the sculpture, and these moulds are then used to pour wax into, and we get a wax duplicate of each section of the sculpture. The wax duplicates are then given a feeding system, known as gates or sprues, and this system will eventually allow bronze to flow into the mould and gases to rise out of it as we're pouring bronze in. The next stage is to build a high refractory ceramic mould around the wax, and to do this we dip it into a ceramic slurry made of colloidal silica and zircon flour, and while it's wet we sprinkle it with refractory sand. When Charles Nettleton first came to Lightning Ridge, or Wollongullah as it was known then, he didn't have anything. He had a pick and probably the shirt on his back. But it was that can-do attitude that he brought with him that was the important thing. The ability to make the best of a bad situation. The ability to use what you had as a matter of resources around you, it didn't matter if it was junk, to remake that and reform that into something usable. And that's what Lightning Ridge is all about. Everything you see here as far as the mining industry goes has virtually been recycled, reused, reshaped, reformed to serve a purpose. And it's that can-do attitude of those early miners that still continues here today in Lightning Ridge. And I have to admire that. And that's the one thing that I was adamant that I wanted to capture in the Nettleton sculpture, was that look of determination. I think that's the key to Lightning Ridge, determination. Once we've developed a mould of consistent thickness and size, we then melt the wax out of that mould, leaving behind an empty ceramic mould which leaves behind the impression of the wax. We've now got a mould that we can heat up and pour bronze into, the bronze taking the place of the wax. The bronze is heated at 1250 degrees, at which point it's ready to pour. We then pour the bronze into the preheated moulds, and we then allow the bronze to cool at its own rate. I can certainly see the attraction to mining. The lure of opals, or any gem for that matter, is one of those things that, well, maybe it's the next bucketful, but it's more than that. Once you get down a hole, time seems to stop, and the troubles and woes of the outside world seem to diminish, and you're there in very much your own world. It's quite a nice, surreal feeling. Once the bronze castings have cooled in their moulds, it's then time to remove the actual ceramic shell itself, which is quite a hard mould in itself and needs to be beaten off with a hammer and air chisel and sandblasted to reveal the cast bronze underneath, which is quite a labour and fairly intensive sort of a process. It's not only the wax casting that has been turned to bronze, but it's also the feeding system. The system of gates, the spruing system, has also become bronze, as well as the pouring cup. So all that needs to be removed as well. They can then be put aside and reused or recycled for the next sculpture. And the actual casting itself gets further cleaning and detailing before it's welded together. It's a bit like a big jigsaw puzzle. Everything fits together, hopefully with precision accuracy, and then each weld has to be delicately handled. The weld needs to be cleaned off, details beaten back over the weld so that there's no appearance of the weld whatsoever. This is Fred Birdell's camp. Fred was one of the early miners out here as well, and it's fairly typical of the camps that you'll find out here in the ridge. It's constructed out of ceiling tin, bits of stone, rock, anything you could possibly find, oil cans, you name it, anything that could be put to use, they certainly utilised it. It's not the sort of place where you could walk to a general store, so anything that you could find, even if it looked like scrap, was usually put aside because you'd find a purpose for it somewhere along the line. It's great that old places like this still exist for people to come and have a look at. It's a real history lesson. The bronze sculpture has been cast in silicon bronze. When it comes to joining the pieces together, we also use a silicon bronze filler rod to join them. This way the sculpture remains uniform in its material all the way through. Casting the sculpture in sections allows for easier handling of the piece during the reconstruction and more practically sized moulds for casting. The bronze sections are all cast hollow for various reasons. Firstly, to reduce the weight of the sculpture. Secondly, to allow for an even solidification or cooling rate after casting, and that prevents shrinkage and cracking due to variations in size. Larger sculptures need to be hollow for another reason as well, and that is so that a system of stainless steel rods can be welded internally for support and also to be used as an anchor when putting the sculpture in place. A lot of effort goes into aligning each piece perfectly so that a join can't be seen in the finished product, giving it a unified appearance. Once together and the welds dealt with, a linishing disc is used to remove any rough and sharp edges, allowing the sculpture to be very tactile and people-friendly. The idea with bronze sculpture, for me anyway, is that people can touch them. They are a tactile thing. The sculpture is then sandblasted to remove grease and grime and to give an overall even finish to the surface. It's then washed down with water to remove any residue that may be left over from the sandblasting. Bronze is more of a coppery gold colour in appearance, so it needs to be chemically treated or patinaed to give it the desired effect needed. In this case, a traditional dark brown patina is going to be used. The heated surface reacts with the chemicals, giving the surface its coloration, and this is what we know as a patination. The patination itself can be developed over many layers of different sorts of chemicals to give it the desired effect we're after. Finally, the sculpture is given 2 coats of a silicone wax to protect the patina and to give the piece a nice sheen. It's hard to believe driving across these plains that men actually walked from town to town, and Charles Nettleton was no different. He actually walked from Lightning Ridge to Whitecliffs with his first parcel of opal. Feats like that really show the tenacity and the true nature and desire and will of these blokes. Unforgiving country and a tenacious spirit, and I think that sums up Charles Nettleton.
local lad, and he was keen. He had a plan. He said, let's do little mini bronzes. Those will actually be a fundraiser for you. He did a limited edition. We still have a couple, if anyone's interested. But it was a big effort over several years. I'm sure everybody in town has contributed to the Nettleton Fund, even if it was listening to my ear bashing at the Opal Festival, talking about the man. So it's been a real journey. We finally were getting the money together. Rhonda White and Gary Yo topped up the fund just about a year ago, and we were able to say, go Brett, go. In 2013, 110 years since that first parcel of Black Opal was sold. And it was yesterday, Andrew Lindsay brought his hoist over. Brett, of course, arrived with his Charlie on the back of the ute. It was sort of like a lightning rod. And he was terribly nervous with all these clouds and storms around. He thought he might have gotten struck on the way up. I think you made quite a sensation coming through Gilgandra and Canamble. This bronze man on the back of the ute. Very exciting. So we actually ended up putting Charlie in place a couple hours earlier than what we thought yesterday afternoon. They brought us a special drill that Charlie could be drilled into the concrete. So the support team was in place, and now we have Charlie back home. We knew Charlie as a teenager, a little girl even, because her parents came here fossicking in the 30s. They met Charlie on the dump, and it's the photograph her mother took that Brett has used to sculpt Charlie. Congratulations to us all, but especially to Brett. Thank you. It's going to be right here in the Opals, and hope we find ours tomorrow. It'll be a good luck piece to us all.
About 150, 160.